Hi, everyone. So welcome to the first ever Imagine Products Data Expert Discussion Panel. Really, we wanted to put this together because I think in the past couple years especially, but honestly, for the last few years, there's been a rise in remote work, hybrid work, and a lot of the mentoring and face-to-face interaction that comes with working in person is fading a little bit. And so we wanted to provide a space for industry experts and professionals to come together and just share their thoughts and their experiences with those out there that may be looking for a mentor or just looking for some more information on this field, because it is changing almost constantly and it's hard to stay up to date on everything. And so it's great just getting some insider information, if you will. So with that in mind, I'll go ahead and get into the first question, and whoever wants to field it, feel welcome to. So the first question is, how has the role of a DIT or a data wrangler changed over the years? And kind of put an emphasis on how it's changed in regards to remote work and hybrid production.
You see everybody's awake and wants to go first.
Who's been working the longest?
I know I've been in this as a DIT. I've been doing that specifically since 2016. And I know just from my personal experience, I have found that over the last few years, especially, I guess, since the pandemic, that it seems like a lot of other people on set have lost what it is exactly we do, or what a DIT is, which is very surprising. Like most of them don't even know. Like I was on a set a while back and they didn't even know that I could generate dailies, which I completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
I was like, that's literally one of the core values of a DIT.
Yeah, just real quick, for those that may not really know, do you want to just briefly go over kind of the main roles of a DIT?
Well, what I was always taught that the DIT basically takes the footage, makes sure that it's archived correctly onto the drives, which coincides with a data wrangler if there is a data wrangler on set. And then their job is from there to do the first gen color grade, apply LUTs if necessary, generate proxies if necessary, create dailies, and export everything to post if needed, whether that be via drives or uploading to like a frame.io or something of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So essentially, like a DIT's key, to summarize, is a DIT is the liaison between the field and post-production.
Mm-hmm.
I can add to that if you want me to.
Yeah, please. Yeah, go for it.
So I work in Vancouver, BC, and I started as a camera assistant in 2007 through their training program. Not really interested in being a DIT, to be honest. It seemed really scary back then. That's because it was all captured to tape, and we were using like giant frame stores and everything. So if you made a mistake, like everybody saw it. Like there was no metadata to hide behind. I would say it was probably around 2011. I think the Fukushima disaster is really responsible for where data management came from. That's my personal opinion. You guys could argue that. We can talk about that later if you want to. But what the Fukushima disaster did was it basically destroyed the Japanese access to tape manufacturing facilities. So the tape stocks disappeared like overnight. Like we were freaking out. We're like, anybody got any HD cam SR tape? Anybody got any Betacam tape? Any like people were like, didn't have any. Coinciding with literally Airy Media and Red having released cameras like 6 months before, that being the Red 1 and the early version of the Alexa, and coinciding with basically the finished rollout of the D21 platform, all these cameras basically had media cards in them, different types of flash process cards. So in Vancouver, our market at the time was almost every show had a DIT and a data manager. So the difference being is that the DIT was really a camera engineer. That's where a lot of the backgrounds came from. A lot of our DITs were actually focus pullers, like really, really big A camera focus pullers. A lot of feature credit guys, like I'm not going to name drop, so I don't know if he wants this to be known, but basically the A camera focus puller from Watchmen decided, hey, this is going to be a career move. I'm going to get into this DIT thing. So he went over that. So the major skill set was like obviously understanding data management, but understanding color correction, color pipeline theory, signal management's a huge one because all the video villages were run and usually owned by the DITs on set. As soon as the cost of monitors came down, it became an investment opportunity. So there was the whole business side of being a DIT from the rentals, not just the hi, I'm a DIT, I'm a labor. It's like, hi, I'm a DIT, I'm also a business. That's a whole other thing. And then the hi, I'm a DIT, it means I'm a camera doctor. So there's an expectation that the DIT on set understands the full menu breakdown of any camera system that's being used. And I think that's something we might want to discuss is like how the change in cameras, I think it's settled down a little bit within the last few years. Most of us will probably agree from about 2018 onwards, there haven't been a whole bunch of like new camera systems involved on set that are necessarily new to the infrastructure. Maybe like, oh, this is a new Alexa, but not like a whole new camera system. But back in like 2012, like Supernatural, for instance, I don't know where everybody's sort of based, but the TV show Supernatural from season 4 to 7, they tried out 5 different cameras.
Oh my God. That had to be a nightmare.
Yeah, interesting.
It was, and it was also, it was just a lot of different, like they were using multiple different cameras on set. And as we all know, the log color spaces, they all have these different starting points. So you had to be very technically minded with working with the manufacturers for their technical LUTs, as well as very good with coming up with early versions of LMTs within a CDL parameter to get to this is how it's actually going to look in post. And then even too, like the boxes that post were using never necessarily align. Like remember, like, oh, a LUT is a LUT is a LUT. No, it's not, because your LUT as a dot cube versus a dot dat, they never looked the same. Like, how's that possible? That's because the secret sauce of a resolve versus a speed grade versus a base light weren't even identical. Now we've solved that, luckily, but it was
the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can probably build on to what Adam said with the camera doctor thing. So I'm now based in Belgium, but I was based in Romania for quite some years, and I started out in 2010 when I was employed by a film lab, which transitioned. It was a Kodak film lab, which started. It was the first Kodak film lab to start a transition to digital. So they bought a base light, they bought a scanner, and they were all telecine and processing until then. And then they started a division because there was no in between. There was no like productions to tape. It was film, and then it was in Romania. It was full file-based digital. So what happened was we were at once data managers and the lab on set. That's how we were considered. And yeah, people had a bit of a trouble getting their heads around what we did, and some people didn't want us around because they were, they didn't understand what the transition was. But yeah, for a lot of years we had to be the camera doctors. Camera assistants would not touch camera settings for, I think, 5 years. I mean, DITs were, you needed to change frame rates, the DIT would do it. You needed to, to preview something, the DIT would do it. They would expect you to do it even if when you know, as they started getting more and more familiar with the systems. And the second thing we had to be, and this is something that relates to what Adam said, with the changing of the camera formats and the changing of the camera models very quickly within those years, we had to walk people through the process, especially a lot of DPs who were taught only film. The film school in those regions only taught film. They had no digital departments, and DPs would start using digital if they got jobs in TV. Other than that, they would swear to Kodak film stock, and that was their life. So you had to work with them and explain to them the system, explain to them why a red is not the same as an Alexa, why suddenly when the Alexa came out, it was, why doesn't it look like the red? Because they had gotten used to the red. Why do the colors look different? What does it mean that it's raw, but it's not the same kind of raw? What does it mean that it's ProRes? And how does it translate to, why can't I change the metadata the way I can do it in red? So this was the kind of the early years where you would have to once, educate yourself, educate people, and then you would have to figure out the workflows as you went along, because Resolve was still, you didn't have the free version of Resolve, so you could take it on set with you. If you wanted to take Resolve on set with you, it would cost you a lot of money, and it was limited in terms of what it did. You only had like Red Cine X for red, and and color, if anybody remembers Apple Color, where you would have to devise these workarounds to export stuff from the Alexa when it first came out. And
those are giving me horrible flashbacks.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Never have to deal with that.
Having horrible flashbacks, especially about
you brought up an interesting point talking about even trying to change frame rates. Like the early days of codecs, I remember we actually had codecs engineers fly from England to Vancouver to run a local workshop.
First show, yeah, that's what happened.
Claremont Camera, which of course has been absolved by Keslow years ago, exclusively for IATSE 669, which is the camera union in Western Canada for the personnel. So a whole bunch of DITs and budding, what we referred to as digital loaders. That's what we call our data category in our region. They were showing us how this is the M onboard recorder. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was like about a box about this big,
yeah.
Sitting on top of the D21 initially. They actually designed it to integrate as an SSD recorder prior to the D21 being retired. And then of course it fell into place on the Alexa, and to go from 24 to 48, you had to flip the SDIA cables. It comes out SDI 1 and 2, and then goes into SDI 1 and 2, or SDI 1 goes into SDI 2 for 48 and vice versa. Yeah. And then you'd have to
I think we lost you. You got muted.
Sorry, hold on. There you go. You'd have to check to make sure that the controller was reading correctly on the LCD screen, and if it didn't, then you didn't get the shot. It ran it at 24 frames, so you'd have to go back and do. So
yeah, it was the wild west of workflows, because I, for example, went to training at RE Media in the UK to get trained on the onboard S, because as you said, you had to flip cables, or you would have to pull a cable, and then when you needed 48, you'd have to pull the second cable in. And then if you were shooting the Alexa with the internal cards, you would have to detach the onboard and only shoot high speed on the internal card, because then you would get time code breaks. So it was something that you needed to be there to fix, because people would just ask you, why isn't it working? What do you mean we didn't get it? And then it was the color component. And this is what happened was, people got it really quickly because they considered us a lab on set. They got it really quickly that we could do the color and we could do the dailies, and it kind of stuck. You know, the kind of expected the DIT to also do that.
Yeah. If I may, I think I've got actually a good segue to bring this back to sort of data management and maybe the product that we're all here maybe to talk about, because we were talking about all these different cameras. Some of the early projects I worked on were Alexa based and also Red based. And so we all remember, I'm gonna need some help here. I'm trying to remember what the software was called, but it was made by a guy specifically just to download Red footage. You guys remember what it was called?
R3D data manager, or
Yes. So there was R3D data manager, and
Yeah.
then the same guy made Alexa data manager. Remember those? And they were,
Yeah.
fairly simple yet easily intuitive user interfaces, but they were beholden to only that camera system. And I remember working on the TV series Alcatraz, and the DIT that I was working under showed me this thing called Shotput Pro. I don't even know if it was version 1 or version 2. This was like in 2011. Luke, do you have an internal database on your mind? Like what version were we on back then?
Version 1 came out in 2008, so that was probably version 2, I'd say.
Okay, I think it was 2, and then I think I remember going to version 3, and that was also when we also had the internal QC, like HD View. Is that what it was? It was a separate program you guys made.
Yeah.
That there was a tab, I remember, in the upper left part of the GUI, and if you clicked it, like your footage would then open and you could play it, so you could actually watch it. And the reason it was really valuable is because we could obviously use a data manager system to safely offload and check, for checksums on various types of camera files. So I actually could say, yes, I actually have all the sound files, or yes, I have footage from an early Sony camera, like whatever, like an FX3 is today, like something from like 15 years ago. And as more and more cameras started to get introduced, that became really, really important, because Sony usually introduces a camera system with its like own proprietary software. I could think of like the Venice or the F55 being an example, but Panasonic, when they came out with their first VariCam, they didn't really invest in the back end of their cameras data management. And we all know that those cameras were basically designed by engineers, not cinematographers, unfortunately. So when you look at the actual file structure, it's a mess. It's the folders and what's inside a folder. It's just way too much information for most people to actually want to go into, but they want to make sure that everything is still there, as the post house might actually need to look at something later on in the line. So I don't know if you want to use that as a segue to talk about software.
You guys have been talking a lot about just kind of knowing the camera and how important that is. And so I was just wondering if you guys have any tips for those, because obviously DITs get their start somewhere and they're usually working their way up from another position or transition from another position. So do you guys have any tips for those that are maybe looking for a transition from whether it's like a camera operator or any of the other on-set positions to a DIT or data wrangler?
So if you don't like have a working knowledge of the cameras, you can. I've been friends with the local rental houses for a long time, and they've always said, hey, if you need to come, throw a camera on a bench and test it out, learn some settings, whatever, come on in and test it. My first DIT job with the Venice, which I'd never used at that point, I'd used a 55, but not the updated version. I actually found some raw Venice files online that I then threw through some software to test out, the dynamic range and how much play I had in each direction. That sort of just gave me an idea of, what this camera is capable of. Whereas for years, having worked on the Airy and the Reds and the DXLs, I just had that knowledge going in. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can.
one.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you go, Alex.
No, I was just wanted to just one quick thing is it's the principle, the workflow. So anybody who wants to transition, they should first understand the process, because it's very easy when you're on set and you're doing a specific job to only be focused on your job. So if you wanna be a good DIT, you got to first learn the process, how it all links, and you first start with data management, and then you get to the to the file processing and to the color science, and then what happens in post and all of that. So you need to have like the whole picture, and then you can start specializing. So please go ahead. Sorry for
Yeah,
interrupting.
I was literally going to echo something very similar to what you're just saying. I mean, my background is a lot in post-production, in the actual post houses. I work a lot in documentary and narrative as well. And certainly what I've seen is the amount of times people just won't have a conversation about workflow and pathway, and they'll make assumptions about how things are going to happen, going, oh no, there's only one way to do this thing. And I often find just from having people talk to each other that they discover, oh, actually, there's hundreds of ways to do this, and we all need to be on the same page, or we're going to just spend all our budget unnecessarily. So what I do very early on in the piece is I work backwards. And I think to get that knowledge of what a data wrangler does and what a DIT does, kind of going backwards and going, okay, well, if I work in a post house as an edit assist or an assistant editor, and I see how the footage comes in, and maybe I see how things are done on set, and then how they have to be in post, I can then better things from that way in. And that's kind of what I did. And I think I've been in a very rare position where I've managed TV shows in post and then gone on set to help streamline things. And I think that's been a really valuable way of not only me learning what the DIT does, but then to actually enter into that role when I've needed to, or when I've needed to actually train other people to do that as well. So I think anyone listening to this that is thinking, what role can I get into? I think it's have conversations with people, and don't be afraid to roll your sleeves up and actually take an entry-level job in post or in the camera team to kind of figure out what that next step is.
Yeah, that's invaluable because, for example, because I started in a post house, I understood what happened in post, and then we kind of tried to make our lives easier by going on set and prepping stuff the way we wanted it. And then, 7 years ago, I started a video production business with my partner. So what we did was, because we would produce our own stuff, we took everything that we learned on set and applied it to our shoots and our post-production process. So it went backwards again.
For me, it was, so I come from like an on-set background, always having worked in the camera department as early as 2007. So for me, it was a lateral move and then an upward move. I guess I could have gone diagonally if I really had cared to. So I started as a second assistant, then went to a digital loader, and then up to a DIT. But so what I would say is, like, how to get into this is really important to find mentorship. That could be, as I think it was Mr. Thomas mentioned, like utilizing local labs and or local rental houses to facilitate your learning by using some cameras. So like physically, like, where is the start button on this camera? So like familiarizing yourself physically with the camera's build, then understanding its menu system, and then having access to footage that it can, so just ask for any lens. It can be a really old crappy lens, put a lens on so you get an image, hook it up to a monitor, and then start rolling, and then offloading that footage. I would really recommend those that want to get into this to start building relations with the software manufacturers. So call up any company and say, hey, do you have a demo? Like, I know you guys need to make money. This is a business, but do you have like a 5, 10, even 30-day demo license available to me? I'm a student, or I really want to get into this and I need some practice, and I can't kind of afford to pay out of pocket just to try it, And I think networking events, there is some cost expense, but like I'm not sure what the version is in Europe for our European listeners, but the NAB conference in Las Vegas every year is an opportunity for technicians to actually go and physically meet and talk with the manufacturers and vendors of software, such as Imagine here, in person. So like, and go do your prep work, like literally write out a list of all those questions you want. Then you go and hey, Luke, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Adam Braverman. We talked like back in May of like 2 years ago. It's my first time at NAB and I've got questions about your product, and like, and maybe if you're really a go-getter, you will email them in advance, say, I'm going to be at NAB and it's crazy. It's like, can I meet you guys like at the end of the Tuesday? Like right when you guys are packing up, nobody will be around. Try it, that can be your personal time to get that information that might be really valuable to your success on your next project.
So like,
and if you're really, and lastly, if you're really lucky, mentorship on set. Like I said, for me, it was like, I got into this because a DIT, actually, I'm going to back up. The shows we were working on basically had a DIT and a loader. Now the loader was getting upgrades to become the DIT on second unit. So now you've got a DIT and a DIT. They both need loaders. So it was creating 2 extra positions of people in the camera department to learn how to do this. So I became the second unit loader under the main unit loader. So I was getting knowledge in like what DITs do, but really supreme knowledge of loading because this guy was a trained loader under a very, very good DIT. So I think if you really want to get into this, find a really good DIT who will take you on. That can be to work as a utility or as a loader or both or all 3 positions if that really interests you.
We've talked a bunch about cameras, but it's also important to learn your signal distributions. But I think my main thing is learning monitors and understanding nit brightness. I'm currently running editorial on a project that was using the Alexa Mini LF, and they shot their exposure monitor was the Small HD Cine 7, which is rated at 1500 nits compared to the 1000 nits the LUT was designed for. So I'm getting all this footage through the pipeline because we don't have a DIT on this job. And I'm like, it's too dark. Why is it too dark? And he's like, oh, it's DaVinci's fault. It's, because we wanted to edit in Premiere, but we're doing dailies in DaVinci. And, through staring at scopes and doing all this back and forth, he was using the Small HD at full brightness to expose for everything. So everything that was coming in was a stop and a half darker just because of the nit difference from the LUT and the camera to the monitor. So we're learning like how to work with monitors and how to calibrate a monitor to a specific camera platform is also really important.
Yeah.
Sounds like a perfect test case where they should hire a DIT.
Yeah, it won't happen. I guarantee it.
Well, they're going to be reshooting a lot of stuff then, baby.
If they get underexposed footage often enough, they will probably start.
There's shots that I was looking at that are shot in the wrong color temperature that are almost completely devoid of information. It's just pitch black. And by the time you grade it to the point where it matches the previous shot, which it's a transition from a cityscape to a dive tank, there's, in the ARRI raw or in the ARRI ProRes footage, you can just see the square pixel binning like you would in a low bitrate proxy.
Yeah, well, without getting too far into semantics about job security, because that's not what we want to be talking about here. I think what Hunter is saying at the very minimum for the listeners of this YouTube video, can we call it that? Is that directors of photography need to at least understand the complexities of digital capture. I guess what I am trying to say is that sometimes there's just too much for one person to fully understand and grasp at an expert level. And that's where a good DIT should be hired and respected, because the DIT is literally the physical backstop on set to say, this doesn't look right. We need to reshoot this, like, or before we roll, like, hey, you know, boss, sir, ma'am, let's just check these camera settings. Oh, okay. Yes, it's good. Now we're ready to shoot. Because go and reshoot something, or to rely on post to utilize their tool set will actually cost them more, because post-production operators, generally speaking, usually cost more per hour on a basis, or require more hours to fix something. So they really want a cost perspective, get it right the first time on set. You know, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
That's a great point, because I'm going to tell you a short story. We got a call at one point from a production that was shooting 3 cameras, big production, big name stars and everything, and they didn't have a DIT. They just had a data manager who did not watch footage. He just dumped it, and they had somebody doing dailies who got all of the footage, watched it, and did dailies. And one day they freaked out because they were getting like 2 days of dailies. And they figured out that one of the cameras, they were shooting red epics, one of the cameras was set up wrong, and it looked underexposed as compared to the other cameras, because it was set up wrong. And they were freaking out so hard because they thought they would have to reshoot, because even if they had the other 2 cameras, they thought, oh no, we had these shots that we really want on this camera, so we might need to reshoot. And by going through the metadata of the red, we found that the picture was salvageable, and it was readable, and was gradable, and it was fine. But had they had a proper DIT on set, matching settings, monitoring things accurately, this would not have happened. In the end, it was a happy ending, but people got really intense because of that.
Yeah. And that's in all the interviews that we've been doing, it's just been a common theme. Like, you need to have a good relationship with everyone else on set, because when something like that does happen, you obviously need to be comfortable enough to tell them this doesn't look right, or something needs to be changed. And that just plays into how big the networking and building relationships is, not just for the current job you're on, but obviously for future jobs that you're going to be on.
Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, don't tell me wrong. We're talking about like monitoring. Look, I will full disclosure here. Okay. I made a huge mistake as a student when I was in university shooting a project. It was like with an HD camera, or an early HD camera, and the monitor was not set up correctly. And lo and behold, yes, I underexposed an interior scene by like 2 full stops, and it looked horrible, and we had to go back and shoot it. And I had no excuses to tell the director. I was like, I'm really sorry. It looked fine, because we were students. We did not have the knowledge at that time to understand that the monitor was basically boosted. And it's like, what you're seeing on the monitor is maybe not what the camera's actually seeing in the end until you've pulled it off. So you need to understand monitoring, calibration. And if you don't, then rely on an expert to get your monitor calibrated. You need to get it calibrated properly before you leave the rental facility. Or you leave the rental facility and then you take the monitor. This is really what you should be doing. If you're doing a major prep, so like 5 days of prep for a TV show or a feature, like the second day, you should be taking all the monitors that you either own or are getting from the rental facility, and you're going to the post facility, and you're talking to the dailies supervisor, and then meeting the dailies operator, the person who's actually going to be doing the dailies, saying, here's my A, my B, and my C monitors from my director's card. Here's my A and my B and my C for my card. And here's my A and my whatever. You might have 20 monitors, doesn't matter, or 1 monitor. You want them calibrated right next to that master monitor in that color suite. So when they come back being calibrated, and you're now back in the rental facility on day 3 or 4 of your prep, and the director of photography rolls in to do their camera test, and they look at it and go, good, and you can tell them with confidence, say, what you're seeing is exactly the way it's going to be as if you leave set and go to post and see that shot 5 hours later after you shot it.
So what do you do if your dailies house is not local? We've done a bunch of stuff where our dailies come from New York.
I will ship the monitors. I will ship them. Yeah. And at the very minimum, I'll ask a couple of very key questions. What gamma are they? Are they 2.2? Are they 2.4? Are they using OLEDs? I'll go so specific as the model. I'll be like, are you guys using Sony OLEDs? What generation? Are you guys on like a 2541A, or are you on an A250? Are you guys using Flanders? If you're using Flanders, can you send me your CIE color profile spec sheets? I don't want to get too technical for people, but that's basically the triangle of like the color, and you got the little points, like this is what your red, this is what your green, this is your blue is, and you will review them with the color spectrum profile sheets of your monitors. And if they match, like you're basically looking for your X and Y coordinates for your white bias to make sure that they're hitting those targets. And certain monitors obviously do them a lot better. I mean,
yeah,
we could talk for hours about, monitors and which are good monitors and which are bad monitors and delta values. But I think in the end, we probably can agree there's a few brands out there that we can trust. They are expensive, but you are paying for a very good product. And there are those that want to get into the market and their lower cost option, and they obviously sort of cut some corners. They're more of a field monitor, not a color critical monitor. Like I wouldn't personally trust a small HD monitor to be my color critical monitor. It's a very, very good monitor for like a director to see a shot. You're like outside, bright, sunny day, but in a DIT tent, you probably want to be going with a Flanders or a Sony. And OLED is still king, but until the next type of viewing display gets prepped and ready, I know they're working on stuff, but it's very expensive right now. Like the next generation of monitors costs like $25,000 US. We want to get that down to almost like a fifth of that.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. This could be a whole nother, topic for another, discussion, as the whole monitors and everything.
Yeah. So you remember Cinetal monitors?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Those were great. Actually, I love.
And they were good. And they actually had a little, I think it was like an SD card slot. So you actually could store.
Actually still had one that was functioning. Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
well, we just thought they were neat because they were
2 years ago.
They were LCDs, so they weren't like giant CRT boxes. Because I remember the CRT Sony monitors; those things weighed like 60 pounds, and they were 20 inches or something.
I'm a horrible pack rat, so I keep everything if it's still functioning. But I would add to that because I tend to do everything on a smaller scale sometimes because I do a lot of docuseries and documentaries and stuff. If you get a good color calibration tool with your monitors, they will export the color profile that you can then send if you don't want to ship the monitors. And will work just as fine. They can then compare the data from your monitor, from the calibration to theirs, and see how they match up.
Yeah, so just to kind of segue, you guys talked about obviously like prepping for a job and making sure your monitors are calibrated. You guys have any more prep tips leading in the weeks before or days before the job that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, the first two discussions I have, after the discussion with production, is with if they have a post house already picked up, I would have a discussion with the post house, and the monitoring part is included in that, but also the way they want their files prepped, the way they want their drives organized, the way they want their documentation, what kind of reports, how do you want to organize them, how do you prepare the original camera negatives and the sound and everything, And then there's a long discussion with the DP on the style of the look of the dailies, because in the end on set you are with the DP and you are serving that vision and that visual style. So you need to have a very good discussion. You have to be on point, and that helps, because this was mentioned before, and you mentioned, I think, the fact that you need to be able to make some decisions on set and to communicate to people that some things should not be done. And I think that these discussions help a lot in having this power on set. And because if you have these discussions from the get-go and people are on the same page, then if anything veers off, then you can go and sound the alarm and just, get things back on track.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry, Adam, you go.
I think what Alexandru said right away, he didn't use this term, but I think it's very important. A post-production workflow meeting. If you don't see one,
and the chart that everybody signs off.
Request one and have a PDF and review it. It's basically like, and it's usually like the post workbook, like heck, the script supervisor might be on it. Like everyone has questions like, like, are we starting, like if it's a TV series, like, are we starting on A1, B1, C1 when we roll over to the next episode? Like just every technical question you can think of. You usually don't want it to be on the first day of your prep, because you need to get in there, see the cameras, and come up with questions that you may know. But this is sort of your last opportunity to ask questions before you're going to leave the rental house. They usually put on the last day of prep. I usually like it to be at least the second to last day, because if things change, then I have some time to implement those changes into the workflow that's requested. But I think, a post-production workflow meeting so that everyone is on the same playing field. The post will even literally be asking the questions like, what software are you using to do data management? What software are you using to do live color correction on set? And I will tell them that down to like the version that I'm on. So they'll keep good detailed notes, and they'll confirm all the cameras we're using. And they'll be like, are you adding any little small cameras? I'm like, yeah, we have 5 GoPros.
I have been on both sides of that conversation, and it is so important. I often tell producers, please fix this in pre, do not fix this in post, and spend all your money needlessly. Just basic questions of, are we giving poly audio or mono audio? How are we labeling our audio? Is our sound recorder even monitoring metadata? How does this have to be received by the post house at the end of the day? What's our file naming convention? Basic
what
things.
Checksums are we using?
Exactly. Just getting on the same page, working out where the bottlenecks are as well, and not just expecting that, if I get on set, I'm going to get the slowest drives in the world, and then be expected to be working as if they're solid state drives. It's just not going to be a happy day for anyone.
And sometimes these discussions can become very political. Like we're talking about like checksums, literally working for certain US based studios. They have MD5 checksum mandates, which is really slow compared to XX-64 these days. And the ability that the media cards can be read so fast from readers that are very fast, that we were writing to drives that are very fast, and you can only max out like 150 megs a second. You're like,
And also, I will add to that is trying to sometimes explain to certain productions like the difference in drives and what they're putting on the drives is sometimes maddening. I recently did a commercial shoot, and we were shooting RE 4.5K raw uncompressed footage, and they got me lacy rugged USB 3.0 drives to put the footage on. That was a max of 250 megabytes per second.
Wow, I'm impressed it was even that fast.
Yeah.
That's actually not the worst drive I've ever heard of.
30 minutes.
Something like that.
No, it took me 4 days to put all the footage on the drives. That's not including having to do the proxies and the color grade and everything. Just to transfer the footage.
We have refused to work with a production company a couple of years ago because they had the habit of handing in very slow drives, which would make our, it would make everybody's work, it would put everybody's work in danger. That's pretty much the reason.
My exact words to them when they first handed it to me, I was like, I can't use these. These aren't going to work. And they told me that you're going to have to make them work. I was like, okay, well, the bid that I gave you has now tripled. Because it's going to take me 3 times the amount of time to make this happen.
Yeah.
And they cut me a check right there on the spot. So we made it work.
Yeah. And that's why, you use that post workflow meeting as a stopgap or a backstop if you have that ability, because hopefully by then the drives have been received by the data manager or DIT or we'll call it the digital team.
Yeah.
People, and they've done a workflow test and they've gone, okay, this is a real problem because we're in a very data heavy centric camera workflow and we are not getting speeds fast enough. I mean, if you are offloading something that's less than real-time offload, all right, like you have a media card that records 45 minutes and it's taking 50 minutes to offload, generally speaking, that's not a very good thing to have to do. You want to be faster than it. And for the most part, if you're willing to spend money, I think that's the other thing. It's also it's education. I think a lot of producers need to be educated on the upfront investment in hardware. So that's hard drives or SSDs.
Absolutely. And
they need to know this. And it's obviously naturally, I can understand their inclination not to want to do so on a commercial, because it's literally like a 2-day project or a 1-day project, and they can't see the advantage to spending $2,000 on 2 small raids, but that $2,000 line item on their total budget is really, really important for the greater part of their budget when they are paying labor on the hour for a technician on set, and then also the ingest of that footage in post, because if post-production can't read it any quicker, then they're also stuck.
And that's why I try to always explain to them, because I even offer in my package, I'm like, I have raids for rent. You can just rent these from me and then just ship them back when you're done. And they still didn't want to do it, but that's just one of my many horror stories. I remember I had another producer that on a TV show who argued with me for 2 hours about the fact that I could not make the Sony Venice shoot in C-Log. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
It's not a Canon camera, sir.
Yeah.
It's a Sony camera.
That's exactly how I put it. I was like, I can't do that. It's not a Canon. I can make it shoot an S-Log because it's Sony. I can do S-Log all day long.
Luke, you need to that was the quote of the day. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the byline for this whole discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a Sony, it's not a Canon.
That's why education and educating everybody who's involved is so important, because you avoid getting questions like these that just stop you dead in your tracks. You literally hear the needle off the record just jump when you get a question like that.
There got to be a point about a year ago where I just stopped accepting things like that, where if they want it in C-Log, I put it in S-Log and say it's C-Log. And if a producer is going to act like that, then I'm not going to deal with it. I had a director that wanted every color in his monitor so dark, but he wanted the camera to be recording that. And I'm like, post is not going to like that. I got post to say that they wouldn't like that. He didn't care. So I put a LUT box on his monitor, and on that LUT box alone, I turned down everything. So we were still seeing, enough data on the screen, but he was seeing as dark as he wanted it. Post was happy, and they colored it to make it look that. But if they had to fix it, that would have been exorbitantly more expensive than, so there gets to be a point where you're just like, I'm going to do it the way it should be done and make it look like I'm doing it your way.
One of my
that's why.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just want to say that's why they need to pay for a live grade, for example, because they would see it as they wanted to see it, but you would be capturing what you need to capture.
Well, we were doing live grade on that shoot, but they weren't sitting with me. They were sitting closer to the scene, and I made the live grade specific for that LUT box to be darker.
Oh, so what you're saying is like you would have a monitoring LUT for the director of photography and a different monitoring LUT maybe for the producers. So the producers who are like studio execs feel like they've got that nice, safe, rosy, prime time, everything's bright kind of image that they're, because we're really talking about is like that security, that it's not going to be like too artistically dark.
Well, and because I've done stuff where they made it too artistically dark, and then the colorist, who was a phenomenal colorist, tried to brighten it up, and you just see the pixels, and it was not a great look. And that's what made me realize, like, I need to have a workflow designed for those instances. And in the case that I was mentioning, the DP was the operator, so he wanted to see it as the camera was seeing it. The director and the producers wanted to see it, everything crushed.
Well, it sounds more like a miscommunication of artistic intention, to be honest. I mean, like, because I understand when they're saying they want it dark, I've known a lot of directors of photography will literally utilize the lighting and the in-camera capabilities to essentially burn their look in. Like they will produce a very thin digital negative so that post cannot mess with their artistic intentions. They will not utilize a heavy CDL correction or a heavy base LUT as their look for their show that crushes everything down, because it's still metadata and they don't want somebody to mess with it later on in post. So they will literally, like, if they're getting like 16-foot candles, they'll be like, no, I actually want it to be 4-foot candles. Like I want this thing dark, and he's only going to be hit with like one little eye light. That's all you see, because I'm making my artistic piece here. And I mean, whether we agree with it or not, we are here to facilitate the director of photography. Now, if the director of photography and director are not seeing eye to eye, and that's a mommy daddy fight, and we're going to leave the room.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're all laughing because we understand it. That's also an interesting thing about being a DIT. You start to move into the political realm, because in the DIT tent, you're around with a lot of very powerful people on set, and you need to be attentive, but not feel like you're eavesdropping or snoopy. But you need to be listening. You need to be picking up on those implied tasks, I find. So
it's a weird gambit sometimes. You have to know when to pick your battles, when to stand your ground, when to smooth things over, when to be political, when to wag the dog a little bit. It's an interesting factor sometimes.
Absolutely. Like just choosing the choice of words you use in telling somebody as a warning, like saying, there's no information in the back of the shot, just so you know, like the blacks in the back there are identical to the values of black on this person's clothing, which means I have no separation. So like if you need to bring up their face, you're going to get a bunch of noise on the wall, but it's like how you say that without offending the person who is literally your boss and has been vetted by the studio to be the boss, requires practice.
Yeah, and that's honestly something I struggle with a lot because I tend to not be very hand-holdy. Not to tell sorry to tell another horror story. I remember we were doing a documentary in Montana a while back, and they had sent me a master and backup drive for the whole shoot. We were there for 4 months, and the master and backup got filled within like the first 2 months. So I contacted our post-production department and that requested a new master backup drive. And their solution was to just delete old footage off of the old master and backup in the field. I'm like, no, you don't do that ever in the middle of a shoot, ever. This is an ongoing show that we are shooting that is not even aired yet. I've never heard anyone, and I've been doing this since, I've been in production since 2001, and I've never heard anyone ever tell anyone to delete footage off a master or a backup drive. Ever. You are the post-production department and you're telling me to delete the master footage off of the drive. How is this even possible? The DP is like, you just told someone to delete our footage. We would have to come back and it cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars to come back and redo this footage. And you're like, well, we already have it. And 2 days later, their raid crashed and they lost everything.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, in their defense, playing devil's advocate, did they have like multiple bonded copies and LTOs in various locations, and that's why they made that decision, or not? I mean,
They should have.
right.
They didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's stories like that as to why a lot of these sort of like procedures that digital loaders are taught exist. You know,
Yeah.
the whole like, you know, two is one and one is none is, you know, very important. And it's also why when you look at insurance and bonding a product, why the insurance companies always exist on like multiple copies in different locations. And that's purely from like a fire. Like, you know,
Exactly.
they might want it in a fireproof vault or safe, and they want it in 2 different places. I don't mean like 2 different rooms in the same building. They want it in 2 separate buildings that are maybe separated by several blocks.
Yeah, when they travel, they don't never travel together. When you change
Exactly.
locations,
Yeah, so
or
exactly.
when you
Don't
change
put it on the
countries,
same
for example,
airplane.
when you ship, yeah, somebody picks it up, somebody shipped, you know, others get shipped. Some stay
One
behind.
flies, one ships.
Yeah.
We had an instance where production dropped off the 2 drives. I told them to send one day and one the following day. They ended up on the same plane.
Oh no.
Everything got there fine, but I didn't realize they waited until Friday to ship one of them and Saturday to ship the other, and they didn't send the plane out until Sunday. Or whatever the deal was.
They needed, did they understand why they needed to ship them separately, or did they just think that you were?
I told them that they need to ship it separately. What they didn't, the problem was communication. They told the production office, which had the drives, the production office gave one of them to a PA, and then the PA brought one drive and then brought the next one the following day. And nobody was tracking to see whether it had left the facility, gotten to Memphis, gotten to wherever it was going. It was just, you know, and it's the same problem we as DITs deal with all the time. It's just poor communication with production.
That's why you know, workflow sheets are good in the beginning, because you can even outline these things, like how do you ship. For example, you give them one drive now, and then you say, once I get confirmation that the first drive has shipped, then I will give you the second drive.
Exactly.
You know, and you put this in writing at the beginning, and everybody signs off on it. And if they want to veer off that document, then you can send an email and say this is not, you know, as per the spec sheet that we did, you know. And then they can, if they want to take responsibility for it, then they need to accept this in writing.
Also, I don't know if everybody does this. It may just be me and my paranoidness. I have an onboard RAID. I just keep a scratch copy of all the footage for like 90 days,
Yeah.
just in case. I'm like, in that case, if anything happens, I have a copy if you guys need it.
Yeah.
I don't have, I wouldn't have enough space to do that. I don't know how many like terabytes you guys are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. It would be cost prohibitive for me to have to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just added some more, so I think I'm currently at like 40 terabytes.
Okay. I'm getting like upwards of 4 to 10 terabytes a day on a TV show.
I definitely echo your paranoia there, and I do that, and I have LTO copies of most things that I'm involved in if I can.
But do you guys have lab services that help support your projects, or you guys are acting as labs yourselves?
Lab services myself, because I do, like I said, I mainly do documentary and docu-series.
Then that I fully get. I understand.
Yep.
You know that, and I just wanted to preface that, especially for our listeners, to sort of understand the different
so I mainly,
personal security that one needs to take.
Yeah. I may do like one feature a year, just to keep those chops fresh, kind of thing. But I like the docu-series just because in the documentaries, I like the smaller crews and the run and gun style of it. I just finished a 6-month one for the XFL for ESPN, following a bunch of their players and coaches and stuff. So that was really neat.
Yeah.
We literally wrapped Monday.
What I was referring to was more thinking that people who are listening to this is that if you are the lab, then you have like an extra duty of care to make sure you've got long-term storage and built into a contract with the client as well, that you're going to say like, I'm going to keep a copy of this on a hard drive or some type of cold storage that could be like LTO for X amount of days, and I'm going to charge you this as like a rental fee or part of a package agreement. But if you're working as a DIT on set that has a lab, I don't feel like the onus should be on the DIT to have to do that. Like I carry a 64 terabyte 8-bay RAID, and I have a whole bunch of shuttles that I rent to production for the footage to move from set to post. But post-production has a massive SAN, like 192 terabytes. And that's just for our show. They might have like 10 SANs with all these bays and LTO machines literally spinning all the time. So like, I don't keep copies of the show after the show's done.
Yeah,
like I said, I only keep it
the same for me as well.
Yeah, I only keep it for like 90 days, and it's just like a safety thing. But I do offer like the LTO service as, like you said, as an extra fee. I have that in my package that I send them. I'm like, I do offer this service for X amount of money.
Awesome.
So I do have that I give out to shows.
Hey, Luke, why don't we talk about LTOs for a second? I don't know if people know what LTOs are. I'm sure we do here, but why don't, like Nation, do you want to lead this off? Why don't you tell the listeners what an LTO is?
Literally long-term archiving tape, I guess I forget what the actual LTO stands for. I know it's long-term
It's linear tape open.
Linear tape open.
Linear tape open, yeah.
Yeah, I forget. It's been so long since I've learned all this stuff. But yeah, it's just basically like a long-term, and they're guaranteed to last for, what is it, 9 years?
This is what it looks
there.
like.
Yeah.
So they can see this is what an LTO tape looks like.
Yeah.
It's the cheapest cost per terabyte you'll get, but they're incredibly hard to work with and loud.
They're very loud. They're very finicky, and they are a huge pain in the butt to create. I have found, I don't know about anybody else, but they last forever. I have some that I've literally had for 15 years, and I popped one in the other day and it worked just fine. All the stuff's still there, not corrupted in any way.
Yeah.
You've got to have a great set of LTO drives as well. And the LTO generations, you have to keep up with them too, which is an endless endless fun fiasco. And it is very time consuming, but you can sleep well knowing that they're in a fireproof safe somewhere and your data is secure. And that's at least how I get to sleep at night.
Exactly.
You just got to migrate them. If it's something that you keep for a high number of years, you just got to migrate them every few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've never had to actually worry about. Like, yes, I have written LTOs, but I've never had to write an older generation LTO to a newer one. But I'll defer this question to my colleagues here with better knowledge. What is it? An LTO can be read back 2 generations or 3?
I think it's 2.
Right. So I think we're currently on LTO 7 and LTO 8 machines right now, correct?
Yeah.
Maybe even LTO 9. So we're saying basically there's a machine out there that's still viable, like a good LTO 6 deck. So you could essentially read an LTO 4 tape. And LTO 4 is going back quite a little.
Yeah,
like you might want to
So-
get that data off.
The connectors
right
have
now.
changed in the meantime, because now you have, I think there's Thunderbolt, but before you had like, SCSI and all of those connectors.
Oh God, SCSI. I never worked
Oh,
with a
gosh.
SCSI one.
So
I
you need
did
a
work
com-
one
if
that
you-
had
if you-
SAS. I did have
Yeah,
a
you had
SAS
SCSI, and then
connector
you
one.
had SAS, and then you went to Thunderbolt, I think.
Yeah, and for the listeners here, so SAS is basically another cable connection. It's a pretty thick connection. It sort of looking like an HDMI cable at your home. It's about that kind of relative thickness.
Yeah, but much sturdier and
much
thick
sturdier, and
Really weird end on it. I remember that.
had very, very high data throughput at the time. I think like it could do about 6 gigabits a second, which I know sounds very slow today, but this is from the times when Firewire 800 and USB 2 existed, and it was multi-laned, like you could do multiple streams of information at 6 gigabits a second. So it was sort of
if I remember
RAID
well,
standard.
because we talked about the codecs on board. I think if I remember well, some of the old readers of the codecs were SAS as well.
Really?
I think so. Like for the onboard M or S, I think they have some SAS readers.
Oh, the readers. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There was the SAS dual dock. So this was when they were moving away from the onboard recorders to the Alexa XT, which had the XR mags. So it was kind of like a pack of cigarettes. That's the size of the card. So you'd pull this giant card. It was beefy. It was like a heavy card. It had some weight to it. I think there were 512 gigs, maybe a terabyte. That was the first generation.
Yeah,
They
I
eventually
think
went to 1 and 2
512
terabytes.
Best hand warmers ever.
Yeah, and it was about like, I'm just going to use my headphone baggie here, but so the dock was about like this big, and so basically you could put like a card, like 2 cards in, and then you'd have a SAS cable at the back, and you could pull the information off of the card relatively quick. That was before they introduced Thunderbolt docks, and it was very
before
helpful.
that, you had like before that you had for the onboards, you had the big mags, and it was like a saddle that you put the mag in, and that also had SAS in it, because nothing was fast enough to support it.
Yeah, there was
Because
those
the other
USB
ones
3
were, I think,
pucks. They were not
eSATA.
very. The USB 3
Yeah,
pucks were not very
good.
good. They were slow.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to cut the conversation short. We're getting a little close to the time. But is there anything else? Any last minute ads? Anybody wants to say?
We'll apologize that I dropped out for a little while. We're having a bad storm and I lost power.
Oh, you're good. No worries.
Just a note for everyone listening to value your data. The reason that people make stories is literally embodied in that hard drive. So get a few of them and get some software, just like Shotput Pro or Pre-Roll Post or whatever you're going to use, and sleep well at night knowing your data is secure and your story is ready to be told.
Yeah, it's like we always say we were not in the business of selling data management. We were, in the business of selling peace of mind. And I think peace of mind starts with knowing that your data is safe and that it's been reviewed and that it's been backed up in double or triple backups, and that everybody knows, you know, how they stand with in terms of what's been captured.
Absolutely. And don't get complacent. Keep on top of the industry, learn the new cameras, take, you know, if there's a class being taught that you see, go take it if you have the time. Learn the new stuff, stay on top of everything. Because that's how you, if you get complacent, that's how you get left behind.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. I know we had lots of different time zones, and so some of you are joining late at night or early morning. So I just want to thank you all for being here and contributing to this discussion. I know it's going to be really helpful and even, I mean, just interesting to anybody listening, any of our users and just people interested in the DIT field in general.
Thanks for having us.
Having us on.
Thanks for having us, Luke.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Luke.
All righty. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Appreciate it.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
See you guys. Nice
Bye.
to meet you all. See ya.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all. Bye.
Better.